I still remember the sound of the gate when it snapped shut behind the tow truck, metal screaming, chains rattling, my truck disappearing down the road like it had never been mine, and the HOA president standing there with a smile that said she thought this was already over. What she didn't know was that this moment, the one meant to break me, was the exact second everything turned. I just didn't realize how ugly it was going to get before it ended. I came back to the valley thinking I was closing a chapter, not opening a war. My uncle had passed 6 months earlier, and with him went the last person who truly knew every inch of this land. 3,000 acres. Pines, shoreline, old cattle paths cut so deep into the soil they'd outlast any fence. I grew up here in the summers, learned how to drive on that gravel road, learned what silence really sounded like. Then life happened. College work distance. When the lawyer called and said the land was mine, I felt pride and guilt. Pride because it meant something. Guilt because I hadn't been here when my uncle needed help at the end. The first sign something was wrong came less than 20 minutes after I pulled up to the gate. Bright orange paper, laminated, zip-tied right to the iron bars like a warning label slapped on my family's history. HOA violation. Non-compliant structure. Failure to comply may result in escalating penalties. I stood there rereading it, waiting for the punchline. There was no HOA when my uncle bought this land. There was barely a road. The fence they were citing had been standing longer than the subdivision down the hill. I remember my uncle repairing it with wire and spit, laughing at the idea anyone would ever tell him what he could or couldn't do on his own property. I told myself it was a mistake. Some clerk misreading a map. Some overzealous intern with a clipboard. I pushed the gate open and drove in, trying not to let that orange rectangle live rent-free in my head. But the valley felt different, not peaceful, watched. That night I walked the perimeter like I used to as a kid, flashlight in one hand, boots sinking into familiar soil. That's when I saw them survey stakes. Fresh. Plastic caps glowing white in the moonlight, punched straight into ground no one had permission to touch. I knelt, brushed dirt away, and found the tag. LHA, Lakeshore Homeowners Association. That's when my stomach dropped. They hadn't just fined me. They were measuring me, claiming me, carving my land up while I was still unpacking. The next morning they showed up like they'd rehearsed it. White SUV blocking my driveway. Perfect angle. Power move. Out stepped the HOA president, tailored blazer tablet tucked under her arm, that practiced smile that never reaches the eyes. She didn't ask who I was. She already knew. "We need to discuss your violations," she said, like she was reminding me about a dentist appointment. I held up one of the survey stakes. "You want to explain why your people were trespassing on my land last night?" She glanced at it for half a second, just long enough for me to know I'd hit something real, then straightened. "Your property falls within the HOA's perimeter jurisdiction." Perimeter jurisdiction. A phrase that sounded legal enough to scare people who didn't know better. I knew better. I pulled the folded survey map from my jacket, the one my uncle insisted I keep. Dated decades before her precious subdivision existed. Her smile cracked, just a little. "You can appeal through the board," she said. "Until then, the fine stands." That was her mistake. Not the fine, not the trespassing. The assumption that I'd quietly appeal, wait my turn, play by rules she'd already rewritten. I didn't sleep that night. I spread maps across the cabin table, lined them up with satellite images, old deeds, water rights. And that's when I saw it, the easement. A thin line cutting across the ridge toward the lake. Expiration date 10 years ago. Expired. Dead. The HOA's authority over my land wasn't shaky. It didn't exist. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt sick. Because that meant everything they'd done since then, every maintenance project, every marker, every improvement was illegal. And they knew it. The next morning the bulldozer showed up, orange steel crawling across my pasture like it belonged there, chewing toward the cedar saplings my uncle planted with his own hands. 3 men in reflective vests walked behind it, laughing, pointing, acting like my land was already theirs. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I parked my truck in front of the machine and called the sheriff. When he arrived, he took one look at my deed, one look at their clipboard, and shut the whole thing down. Watching that bulldozer go silent felt like air rushing back into my lungs. But the HOA president didn't retreat. She escalated. Within days, HOA app alerts started lighting up my phone. Photos of me walking my own land labeled unauthorized individual. Posts warning residents about aggressive behavior. Comments spiraling out of control. People I'd never met suddenly afraid of me. That's when the doubt crept in. Maybe I should just sell, walk away, take the money and let them have it. My uncle was gone. Maybe this land was more trouble than it was worth. I sat on the cabin steps one night staring at the lake, feeling tired in a way sleep doesn't fix, wondering if fighting this was costing more than it was worth. And then I remembered why my uncle never left. This wasn't just acreage. It was proof that not everything gets taken just because someone wants it badly enough. The real turning point came when my lawyer confirmed it. The easement renewal the HOA relied on was forged. Not misfiled. Forged. Signature wrong. No county record, no legal standing. That meant the HOA wasn't just overreaching. They were committing fraud. Still, even knowing that the pressure didn't stop, it got worse. Teenagers on dirt bikes revving engines at my gate. Contractors showing up with orders to clear shoreline. Quiet neighbors warning me in hushed voices that the board was planning something big. And then the knock I didn't expect. An HOA board member. Nervous, pale, folder shaking in his hands. Inside were emails, plans, financial logs. A project name jumped off the page, Lake Acquisition Initiative. Phase 2. They weren't trying to manage the land, they were trying to take it. Strip me of credibility, paint me unstable, push a guardianship claim, force control through paperwork and pressure. I sat there, binder open hands, steady, heart racing, and realized something terrifying and empowering at the same time. They were scared. People who are winning don't forge documents. They don't lie this hard. They don't scramble. The final confrontation happened in their clubhouse. Packed room, hundreds of residents. The HOA president at the podium spinning her narrative slides, flashing accusations across the wall like a courtroom drama she thought she controlled. She didn't expect me to stand up. Didn't expect the room to go quiet. Didn't expect her own emails, forged documents, illegal drainage photos to appear on that screen one by one. You could feel the shift, the moment the crowd stopped looking at me and started looking at her. When the sheriff walked in, badge catching the light, and placed a hand on her shoulder, she didn't scream. She didn't argue. She just went still, power draining out of her like water through cracked earth. Court came next. Clean, precise, paper against paper, truth against lies. The judge didn't raise his voice when he ruled. He didn't need to. The HOA's authority over my land was dissolved, their documents invalid, their actions unlawful, criminal referrals issued. Just like that, the empire collapsed. No cheering, no victory laps, just a quiet realization settling over the room that something rotten had finally been named out loud. That evening I walked the ridge alone. The valley looked the same as it always had, wide, patient, unmoved by human arrogance. The land hadn't needed me to be loud, it just needed me not to leave. I didn't win because I was stronger than the HOA. I won because I refused to let a lie become permanent. And that's the lesson. If you don't defend what's yours, someone else will decide it never was.